Welcome everyone to the Supporting Math Learning through Competencies, Standards, and Assessments for grades 6 through 8. These are your presenters today. So we have Annie Wallace from the New Hampshire DOE, and we want to thank the DOE for sponsoring this event. So Annie is your math person there.
Thank you everybody for attending. We appreciate it.
We also have Heather Jenkins from Demonstrated Success. She is the director of our assessment math curriculum there.
Hello, everyone.
And I'm Tammy Hilton. I also work for Demonstrated Success, and I'll be your facilitator for today. So these are some logistics and info. So again, we want to thank the DOE for sponsoring these. This is the third in a series of webinars to support math learning. Everyone is going to be muted throughout this webinar, but we do encourage you to ask questions throughout the presentation by putting them into the Q&A section on your Zoom screen. If you do have information that you want everyone to see, feel free to enter it in the chat. And then tomorrow you'll receive an email with a link to your professional development certificate, a video of this webinar recording, the PowerPoint, and any other documents that Heather and Annie show you throughout the presentation today. And so with that, I'm going to hand it off to Heather, who's going to kick us off.
All right. Hello, everybody. I am going to turn my video off, but I just wanted to say hello. Thank you so much for coming. This here is just a sort of gentle reminder for everybody that's on here and just what I feel like teaching is today. So we're all doing our best to be the most effective teachers that we can. And I just wanted to let you know that that does not go unnoticed specifically for us. And again, we thank you. Our agenda today has to do with looking at some standards, competencies, and assessments. Then we're going to talk about aligning standards with competencies, and then assessing the competencies with performance tasks. And then we're going to wrap up with some question and answers. Again, just like what Tammy said, please just put your questions in the Q&A section. She's going to be monitoring that throughout, and then she'll give us a little bit of a shout when she has any questions or feels like she wants to share with us anything before we move on. Starting off, whenever we talk about competencies, we have to talk about the standards. The building block for any competencies that we feel would be effective in classrooms have to do with the Common Core. The New Hampshire the state of New Hampshire has adopted the Common Core standards, and so that's what we use as a basis for everything. Because of that, I just wanted to review and make sure everybody's on the same page with what the standards are and how to read the particular standards. I know when we get up through middle school and especially high school too, you tend to be in content areas, so you know your standards pretty well, but just want to make sure you know right here we have what are called domains, or we call them reporting categories. New Hampshire SAS has reporting categories, but a lot of times when we talk about standards ourselves, we talk about the domains. So the domains or reporting categories are in the gray area. So for math, we're looking at, on our screen here, expressions and equations or ratios and proportional relationships. As we start looking at specific domains or specific reporting categories, within those categories, we have what are called clusters of standards. So for expressions and equations, this is showing on the screen two clusters of standards. One is use properties of operations to generate equivalent expressions, and the other one is solve real life mathematical problems using numerical and algebraic expressions and equations. So those are clusters of standards. And then within that, you have your individual standards. So each one of these has a couple of standards underneath them. When it comes to understanding your standards, K-8, the standards are very similar, right? They're internationally benchmarked. They're obviously going to provide you with guidance and making sure that you are teaching the rigor in building that conceptual understanding and skills and fluency and having students apply those skills. There is a focus on key concepts at each grade level that I'll show you as well. And their developmental progressions and learning trajectories. So as we move throughout each grade level, the skills build on one another. And so that you can understand as well, this last key point here is that most skills in mathematics go in a 3-year cycle. So that first year they might be introduced. The second year that they are looking at those particular standards, that's when they're working on it and practicing a lot. And then maybe the third year is when it's secured. So it's always good to know with mathematical concepts where you are in that particular cycle. So the key math concepts for each grade level. For you folks, we're looking at grades 6, 7, and 8. We have all K-8 on here so that you can kind of see where they're coming from as well. So you can see in grade 6, it's ratios and proportional relationships and early algebraic expressions and equations. For grade 7, it's still ratios and proportional relationships and arithmetic of rational numbers. And then in 8th grade, linear algebra and linear functions. Anytime we're talking about math standards, we like to look at the Achieve the Core website. This particular page is a 7th grade focus area PDF that we put in here. As you go on Achieve the Core, they have every grade level has this particular type of document. And the Achieve the Core folks are folks that are, a lot of them had to do with writing the Common Core standards. There are a lot of teachers, a lot of professionals, and they have deemed for mathematics those particular concepts that are major concepts, supporting clusters, and additional clusters. So anything that you see here that has the green box is your major cluster of standards. Those are have-tos. The Achieve the Core has gotten a lot more press in the last couple of years, I feel like, because of COVID and because of having sort of those restrictions and not maybe being able to get in as much instruction and having students be able to practice as much because maybe they were remote or maybe it's just been hard because they've had to quarantine. So these documents have really been useful specifically over the last couple of years because we can now see what do we have to get to, right? And then what are those supporting clusters that would be also helpful for us to get to, and then our additional clusters. These were not created because of COVID. This has always been available. Achieve the Core has been around for years. But again, they've just become they've come sort of into light a little bit more over the last couple of years. This is not to say that all standards aren't important, but this just tells you which ones, if you're going to focus on it, are the have-tos. For each one of these, there's also a progression on the second page. So you can see from K to 8 what the progression of skills are. It's important to note here that this is an algebra progression. We know as middle school teachers that the algebra is sort of the end game, right? We want all our kids ready for algebra so that when they get into high school, that they are able to enter high school with the skills that they need. That does not mean that geometry progressions aren't also good to look at or any other types of progressions. This just happens to be an algebra progression.
Standards, competency, and rubrics. So why should we use standards and competency? So traditionally, it basically has been more teacher-centered, and before standards became a focus of how to direct our curriculum and topics for grade levels, we would just pick a topic from the curriculum, design our instructional activities, then give an assessment based on what we did and give the grade back, sometimes with feedback, sometimes not, and then we would just move on to a new topic. Whereas the standards-based practice is student-centered. We want to select the standards from those that the students need to know. We'll design an assessment which students will have an opportunity to demonstrate those learnings, and then we build those learning opportunities and lessons to get the students to the end point. And then we use the data from the assessment to give feedback. Are we going to reteach? Do we scaffold things in as we move on? Or do we just move on? So looking at the cooking shows, my own kids love cooking shows. So you're assessed on the end product. You do all the learning you need to do. You get what you need to do to apply what you learned, and you make your end product. And they judge you based on a rubric. So what are academic competencies? They're broadly stated goals and success skills that are measurable, rigorous, and transferable. So not only are they used there, we can use them in other aspects of life. Competencies empower student learning beyond a single lesson or unit or course. They demonstrate their ability to apply and transfer their learning to new situations. And we facilitate student-centered learning and interweave into the curriculum learning progressions, learning outcomes, while including application and creation of new knowledge, along with the development of important skills and dispositions. And dispositions are a lot of what we call our 21st century skills, things like perseverance, being able to work collaboratively. So what are academic competencies? So they incorporate knowledge, skills, and the dispositions. So competencies incorporate a set of skills with knowledge and dispositions, and the person develops them through their practice and experience in learning them. So our standards, the competencies are the broad statement. How are we going to measure the learning? So they describe how students will apply and transfer their learning to new contexts and situations. And they encompass multiple standards and are assessed multiple times. We're all familiar with the formative assessments that we do in the classroom to ensure our students are progressing. And we allow the transfer of knowledge and skills across content areas. And for the competencies, we generally use rubrics. Standards are the skeleton or the framework of the competencies. They describe what students should know and be able to do in relationship to established criteria. And they're distinct statements that provide the building blocks for the competencies. And for those, we tend to use a checklist. Do they have it or do they not have it? So a checklist is just a set of criteria, skills, or tasks to accomplish. It's not a means of assessing acquired knowledge. It's just yes or no, do they have it or not have it? Rubrics, on the other hand, provide detailed explanations of what constitutes excellence. So they measure that qualitative piece, they assess the acquired knowledge and skills, and they're used to explain exactly what one needs to achieve in the content and performance for that competency. So both checklists and rubrics are useful tools that can guide students in their learning and help us in designing the learning opportunities for our students.
So here is a checklist example. This just happens to be one of the competencies that Annie has created. And what this does is it has your competency on the left-hand side, and then all of your standards that feed into that particular competency are listed underneath it. It's a checklist because each one of those understandings and skills you'll check off as students show that they have those particular skills, and then you will go through and you would be able to take a look at the competency and figure out how you are going to assess that. But again, the checklist allows us to see the competency and those related skills that need to be accomplished, or maybe what still needs to be worked on. It also allows you to see, again, when a student's ready, when have they met these particular skills so that they can show what they know about that particular competency, and what sort of task are we going to be able to use to figure out have they met that particular competency. Some of the other checklists that we look at is a class observation checklist. So this particular checklist has a topic, right? It's a shell, and then you write your little topics in there. And it's basically a quick and visual presentation or sort of way to look at it with students maybe that aren't there yet. Maybe they've met the target. Some might be above and beyond, and then any comments you have. So you're able to see each student really easily on here. So you can have a specific process. This one is mental computation or adding 2-digit numbers, but it could be any mathematical practice or content area objective that you have. And then what also happens is I really like the place for comments, because every once in a while you get like a little nugget of information on a student that is really helpful for you that you might not have gotten if you're just using the checklist. The dates also really help, so you know exactly when you are seeing this particular information, and so that you can go back and say, okay, this was 3 weeks ago, let's see where they are today. Another type of way to be able to look at student performance is a task-specific rubric. So this rubric is used to take a look at where students are with a specific task. So it could be a similar task to what we were just looking at before, which is anything that has to do with a math skill that you're looking at. What I like about this particular rubric is it's a 4-point rubric. When we have a 4-point rubric, you can see that if they're a level 1 or a level 2, they're not quite there yet, right? But then we have that level 3, which is proficient, and that level 4, which is excellent full accomplishment. The point of this is that where you're looking to get students to be on this particular rubric is a 3. But you're allowing students to also go above and beyond what proficient is. So they do not need to be a 4 to have an understanding. That's something that a lot of times when we're creating rubrics as teachers that we forget about. We look at our grade level and where we want students, and the highest amount of points that they can score is being proficient. But how do we get those students who are proficient to also see where they need to go from there? And that is when you've got something like a 4-point rubric here, where you can see that they've gone above and beyond or have full accomplishment on something. For a rubric example, this is from Engaged New York. And what this is this is a 6th grade rubric, and it's helping us obviously take a look at what the learning goals are and what the evaluation criteria is for both teachers and learners. As we get up through the grades and as we're in middle school, you could probably use this rubric with your students because they really kind of start to understand it a little bit more. Whereas when we're looking K-5, you might need a specific student rubric and a teacher rubric. So you can take a look at rubrics that you have. And if you don't feel like students are going to understand that particular rubric, make sure there is a student rubric as well. This is a particular one that's a teacher rubric and a progression towards mastery for this particular skill for ratios and proportions. So it's obviously helping you identify what quality work is. And it's also helping making sure and ensuring that the teacher is assessing students consistently, and it allows you to give feedback to students. So often in our classroom, we get the information and we keep it with us, and we forget that students really need to understand not just the final grade, but what they can do to be able to improve, or where they are currently in their learning and what they might need to do to be able to progress. The last one of these rubrics is, again, another observational rubric. It looks similar to the one that had all the names down the side and then the skills and how they were doing across the top. This one just has the specific information about how they're doing with skills. It has the date and anything that you're thinking of what it means to go above and beyond, or what it means to be on target or not there yet. And then the students' names within each one of those sections. So this is a little bit more generic than a task specific one, but it can be useful in planning out your lessons. Where are students? Am I still looking at my whole group? Am I looking at a little group? Who has it and who doesn't? And then you're able to build upon student strengths and help and respond to any sort of gaps or misconceptions that students may have.
Along with the standards and the competencies and rubrics, how are we going to assess students and what assessments are appropriate for what? So assessments allow teachers and students to monitor their progress towards achieving the learning objectives. It's not all about, do you know it? Do you not know it? Are you good or not? Are you passing or not? We want them to know this is a means of communication. Where are you in your learning progression and progress? These may be approached in a variety of ways, with the majority falling into the categories of either formative or summative assessments. So formative assessments are given throughout the course. Sometimes students know we're giving them because they may be a formal, exit ticket, beginning of the day problem, math probe, or it could just be you watching them and seeing their work and listening to their conversations. Whereas summatives are at the end of the instructional period or sometimes midway through. Formative assessments are monitoring progress. We want to identify the conceptions, challenges, and gaps while students are learning rather than waiting until the end. And the summative collect evidence for student knowledge, skills, and proficiency. Did they learn what they needed to learn, or do we need to have some reteaching or scaffolding information back in as we move along to support their learning? Formative assessments can be given in a lot of different ways for a lot of different reasons and looking at things, but they also help students take ownership of their own learning because they can see how they're progressing as you move along and not just waiting until the end. And the summative is, are we ready to exit or not? Or do we need to rethink how we do things? Or what supports may you need? You're almost there, but you still need a little support. So formative assessments, we tend to use notes and checklists for. Summative assessments, we tend to use a rubric for.
Heather and Mandy, I'm just going to interrupt one quick second. There is a question in the chat asking if you'll send the example rubrics so that they can share them with staff. I just wanted to check in with you on that.
Yes, I think people will be getting the PowerPoint, but I can look and see, and we do have links to where some of the links to Engage New York and Illustrative Math, where they'll see examples of them too.
Okay, great. Thank you.
You're welcome. Oops. Sorry, I have to take down the chat box. This is an example of a formative assessment. It's from Cheryl Rose Toby and Carolyn Arlene. I don't know, people may be familiar with them because they're from the New England area. They have some books called Uncovering Student Thinking About Mathematics in the Common Core, and this is from their 6 to 8 book, but they give good math probes in them that we can look at certain things and kind of by how they answer it, determine where the misunderstandings are or where they're really strong in their understandings. And this is an example of this task. So we can see if student chose 1D and 2C, they were able to interpret the number line representation to get the size of the dividend and the size of the divisor. But if they answered 1C and 2D, then that gives us an idea of where maybe they're misinterpreting things. And here is from Engage New York, summative example thing, and the link is right there to this one. This is just the first line, so you can see what the teacher is looking for, what standard is being addressed in their summative example, which is a problem set of 4 or 5 problems. But each problem is aligned with a different standard or set of standards. And then looking at the assessments that we want to give. Not all assessments are good for all tasks. So this just kind of gives us, what is our achievement target? Do we want just informational knowledge? Do we want to look at their processor skills, their thinking and reasoning or communication? And then we can go across and look at, do we want a selected or multiple response type test that can quickly give us, what is their informational knowledge and what are their common misunderstandings? Do we want a constructed response, a performance task, or an informal assessment like a student interview, or they're giving a speech or they've made a PowerPoint, something that we're heavily involved in talking, but they allow us to see different things that we want to assess in the students. And here's a short video by Jay McTighe, who is well known for his work with standards, competencies, and rubrics.
Your work can feel much smoother with Monday.com WorkOS.
How do we create rich, authentic tasks that give us evidence of student understanding and ability to apply their learning? I think that a modern education should prepare students not only to learn things, but to be able to apply or use their learning in meaningful ways. I want teaching to be like coaching and athletics. In athletics, the players know that there's a game, and that's what they're working to get better at. So just as the game provides a reason for practice and authentic performance as our goal, I hope that students see that school is directed toward authentic, worthy performances, and that teachers function as coaches to help kids get better so they can play the game. So I want students to understand the goals that we're working toward, and hopefully to see that those goals are worthwhile and are worth working to achieve. We should be teaching for understanding and transfer.
Okay, so that finishes up that particular section, and we're going to now be looking at aligning standards with competencies. Just wanted to pause there and see if there was any sort of questions or comments. I know that video, for me, I've seen it a few times. It is something that as teachers, I think that we get so wrapped up with what our day-to-day is that when we put our learning targets up and we have everything sort of ready to go, but our students don't always know exactly what the end goal is. And so we want to just make sure that we're continuing to always think about that. So aligning those standards with competencies is a really valuable way to do that. In doing that, there are 10 principles of competency-based learning. The first one is that all those learning expectations are clearly and consistently communicated with students and families for that matter, right? A lot of times we need that family support. So being able to share that information with families is helpful. You're probably lucky because you have middle school students, and maybe you have like a Google Classroom or Canvas or Schoology or something where parents are able to kind of take part or see how their students are doing. And that's always key to the success of a lot of students. Also, when it comes to competency-based learning, we want to make sure that the student achievement is evaluated against those common learning standards and performance expectations. So that's why we look at the Common Core. That's why when we're looking at those performance expectations, we're always going back to those standards. And then the forms of assessment also are standards-based, right? And we want to make sure that those assessments are doing what they need to assess those standards. Sometimes we have assessments that we've been doing for a number of years or that we're told to do. And it's always good to go back and look at what is the purpose of this? Why am I assessing this? And how is this going to help inform my instruction? The formative assessments, right? We want formative assessments during competency-based learning so that we can know how we're going to be able to be instructing students to make sure they're meeting those expectations. There's summative assessments in a competency-based learning system as well, so we know what they are achieving, right? That is helping us understand the proficiency level of that specific student at that point in time. It's funny because summative assessments, we always say, are at the end. And so many of us say, well, we've got this summative assessment. We have, a bunch of kids that haven't learned it, but we have to move on. So what we need to start doing is being able to balance, when do we move on? And when do we say, wait, we need a little bit more tier 1 instruction. We thought the students had this. We need to check again and to maybe reteach or scaffold some of that learning. The academic progress and achievement are all monitored and they're reported out separately from what the work habits are or sort of character traits of that. So it's separate from, did they turn in their homework, or separate from, exactly, maybe it's not like the neatest presentation or what have you, but is there academic progress happening and where is their actual achievement? So the academic grades are going to communicate that learning progress and what the achievement is. And here is the big one. Students are given multiple opportunities to improve their work when they fail to meet expected standards. So I have kids in high school, and as they've gone throughout the grades, it has become less and less available to them to be able to improve their grade or to show their learning. So we need to continue to make sure that, I know with certain courses, you need to say, okay, this is an honors type of course. Our expectations are that you take this particular assessment and that's your grade. You aren't able to improve your grade or what have you. With competency-based learning, it's different. You need to give them those additional opportunities to be able to show what they know. And it's not necessarily a standard test. It's some sort of task or something where they're applying their learning and they need those additional opportunities to show growth. And then making sure also in that same vein that they're able to show that achievement in multiple ways, right? A lot of times when we say we're going to show the achievement, you give students a specific way they're going to show that achievement, but maybe it's somebody making a video compared to somebody making a poster, compared to somebody doing some sort of, blog or what have you. So you want to make sure that you're giving that opportunity to show it in multiple ways. And then students are also given the opportunity to make important decisions about their learning. They have that sort of choice in learning and understanding in which directions they're going to be able to go with their learning and where they might need to improve and where they are already successful.
Originally, the model competencies for mathematics in New Hampshire were very broad, went across grade bands with examples of standards that could meet them. Now the model competencies are more grade aligned and given the standards that would fall within that competency, and then with the skills and understandings within the standards. And again, these are model competencies. They don't, your school may already be further ahead in the competencies and things, and you already have them set up. But here's an example of what a competency and the standard and skill and understanding alignment would look like. Part of our competency and standard work is the depth of knowledge, and understanding that depth of knowledge is not a hierarchy the same way Bloom's taxonomy is. Rather, it's as the depth of knowledge levels go up, it's not about greater difficulty, it's about the amount of cognitive rigor or the amount of flexible thinking, seeing multiple possibilities and perspectives, and approaching a problem in different ways depending on how you see it. So tasks, we begin as a beginner, like skiing, decoding words, using mathematical formulas, learning to play a sport or something that may seem difficult at first, but as we practice more and more, they become easier, but the DOK level doesn't change. A more complex task, a DOK 3 or 4, requires students to apply those memorized or internalized skills and concepts in new, more challenging, complex tasks. So it's similar to the athletic teams, learning to play and practice skills like dribbling, shooting, passing before they use them in multiple ways during an actual game. Depth of knowledge is not a hierarchy. In reality, tasks at a lower DOK level are needed. They prepare the students for the skills and foundation understandings that they need to then be able to apply and explore more complex non-routine problems. It is a tool to help strategically scaffold learning so students can move from the basic to the deeper understandings. And in mathematics, it's not the number of steps a problem has that determines the cognitive rigor. It's more the non-routine nature and how one step might lead to a variety of different decisions that can be made as you move forward in that task. So looking at this, we have 3 problems. This is from Robert Kaplinsky's matrices. And if we look at this, we can see that B is the DOK1. Find the surface area of a rectangular prism, and it gives us the units. We have to know how to do that. And when we have that down, that DOK1, then we can move on to a more complex problem. And we can see that C is our DOK2 because now we're given the surface area and they have to provide us 3 different rectangular prisms that will each give us a surface area of 20 square units. So they'll have to try multiple variations out to see which ones fit the criteria or not. And then DOK3 is A. So now they're taking what they used in 3 and then finding the one that will give us the greatest volume while having a surface area of 20 square units. And DOK4s tend to be those longer term projects that students do that take multiple days and require multiple applications of information and learning. And here's an example of Robert Kaplinsky's depth of knowledge matrix. This is the 6th grade one. And in the handouts, the link that you'll get to the handouts later on, there are the matrices for 7th and 8th grade also, as well as Algebra 1. So in aligning our standards with competencies, templates or graphic organizers can help in reviewing or designing performance tasks to assess a competency. We want to make sure that the standards we want the students to learn and the knowledge that we want them to be able to apply can be found in that task. And here's just another template that can help us in planning to meet student learning and meeting a competency or assessment of a set of standards. What is it that I want the students to know and be able to do? This is how I'm going to assess them. Now, how am I going to get them there? Proficiency versus mastery. So one of the features of a competency-based system is we want our students to meet proficiency. can they do this? Do they have the knowledge and skills to be able to apply in a variety of situations and problems that come their way? And mastery is that I have it to a depth of knowledge. I am very flexible. I see things that maybe other people don't see and apply. And a lot of that still comes with practice and interest. So we think of kids playing video games. Some kids can move on and they get to the next level, and others keep practicing and find all sorts of different avenues. Or we think of we have our plumbers and we have our master plumbers. So it's you still know it, you still do it. And then the developing and emergent ones let us know that students just entering in their learning, and developing is they're almost there. They may need a little bit more support. They may need a little bit more scaffolding, but they're almost there.
Right. And in talking about this too, Annie and I have had multiple conversations about that. Again, that proficient level is where we're looking to get students, and that mastery is not necessarily needed to be able to move on. That proficient is where we want students to be able to be. We'd love them to all be in mastery, but not always the case. All right, so next we're going to look at assessing competencies with performance tasks. So just a reminder, when we're looking at competency-based education, we're looking at that teaching and learning. So all your curriculum, all your instruction, all your formative assessments and everything are about 90% of the work that you do in your classroom. That summative assessment and reporting out, so those performance tasks or some sort of proficiency-based grading, is about 10%. So you are spending the majority of your time in instruction and making sure that students have all of those skills to be able to get to that summative, or that performance task is what we're going to be talking about this afternoon. So what is a performance task, right? So what are they? They're a summative type of assessment. Again, it is related to a competency-based or mastery-based assessment model. They're also called performance assessments or performance-based assessments, right? So these are also dealing with not just trying to show what skills they know, but applying those skills that they've learned and applying that knowledge to be able to really look at authentic real world problems or tasks. It also involves, because it's the application of skills and knowledge, we want to make sure that we're giving them complex problems, right? We want to make sure that they're not only novel, but they're complex, they're rigorous. And these particular types of assessments can be embedded throughout a unit. They can be short or taking place at the end of a unit. They can be part of a lesson series. However you would like to embed them in there, they're not always just that end of unit culmination type of assessment. And they're always providing feedback to the learner. So characteristics of a good performance task. So again, we're asking for the application of knowledge or skills, not just recall or recognition. They're open-ended, and a lot of times they don't have a single correct answer. Maybe different students are finding a different way to be able to get to what they feel is a resolution to a problem. Novel or authentic contexts are obviously preferable. We don't want to continue to give them the same situations and just change the numbers. And then we want to make sure that that students are providing an evidence of understanding, because they're transferring those skills into a new situation that might not be super straightforward and cut and dry. And it's through that sort of application of those skills or knowledge that they are giving you the information that's needed to make sure that they have an understanding of a specific set of skills or a specific set of standards. And they are typically involve more than one step, right? We want multiple steps, and then they can have several different standards that they're looking at or outcomes. And a lot of times it's good to integrate, do cross-curricular type of performance tasks, also incorporating those 21st century skills, and make sure that we have rubrics for any sort of performance task that we are giving to our students. So a performance task, it can occur over time and doesn't need to be done in one sitting. Sometimes they are and sometimes they aren't. Again, it's aligned to standards. It is resulting in some sort of tangible product or observable performance. It also encourages self-evaluation and revision. Again, we were saying that they need to have more than one chance to be able to do something. If you are doing an end of unit performance task or to be able to look at a specific competency, you want students to be able to start the evaluation, look at it, have peer reviews, talk with the teachers, make revisions, and continue to expand their knowledge and understanding of specific concepts. They also, any sort of performance task reveals the degree of proficiency. And again, it's based on that established criteria, and it is known before students actually are doing the performance task. They know there's a rubric available to them, or there's some sort of understanding of what the process and the end game needs to be. And it can involve working with others as well.
Inside Mathematics is one of the resources we have available to us on the internet that provides some vetted, well-constructed tasks. The rubrics for this tend to be point-based rather than a 4-point proficiency scale, but they do show and provide discussion to different student work. And the site also offers other resources and support for teachers. Here's another task from Illustrative Math. Again, they are another resource available to us. They also have some videos on the mathematical practice standards, as well as the content standards. They have kindergarten through high school tasks. No rubric is usually provided, but there is a commentary that you can pull from and use. And here are some other places. Balanced assessment, the rich mathematical PACE tasks will also be coming to and housed within the New Hampshire DOA Canvas site, so people will have a task bank.
Right, just so you know, these are all hyperlinked, so we'll go right to those websites.
Assessing competencies. So planning and using assessments. We want to ensure the assessment is appropriate for the specific purpose that we're looking at. Design or select assessments. We don't need to all create them. There's some wonderful, good, strong resources out there, but we want to be able to take a look at things and say, is this good? Does it align with the purpose? And we want to be able to interpret and use the data from the assessment to address our student needs and in planning forward. Are they getting it? Are they really strong in something? Is there a common weak area, or do I just need to touch base with 1 or 2 students on something? PLCs, either across the content area or across the grade level, can help support and give you the collaboration to develop assessments, look assessments over, help analyze data, and help to plan next steps and use of the evidence. So using effective classroom assessments to inform our teaching and learning practices, because competency-based learning is student-centered, we're constantly looking where our students are. We want to encourage our students to look at where they are so they take ownership of their lessons. We want to make sure we're using the right evidence for the right purposes. Improve skills in critiquing and revising existing assessments. Maybe you found an assessment you really like, but you want to just tweak it a little bit to better set the needs, or maybe you incorporated one more standard into your competency than the one that they had. It also allows us to have deeper knowledge of the current student understandings. We're looking at how they got to their answer, what reasoning they applied, what approach they took, and it helps us make more informed instructional decisions for the students right in front of us. And it helps us in making more efficient and effective use of the information from district and state level assessments. So the educational outcome is for improving our own student learning. Universal design is a state initiative as well as just good planning purposes. It's an approach to pedagogy, curriculum, and assessment. It is grounded in the learning sciences and neuroscience. And it transformed the focus of changing students to meet the classroom demands. That's a teacher-centered classroom, to changing the curriculum and our lessons to meet the complexity and variability of the students we have in front of us. And it's asking us to design learning experiences across the differences rather than to the middle of the class. So this is just a graphic that CAST, which is the National Center for UDL, and IRIS are all good sources for UDL information. And it helps us to, how are we meeting individual needs in engagement, representation, and action and expression. So it's working again with the backward design model. Where is it we want our students to get? And then once we know where we want them to end up, then we can plan the pathway to get them there. And here's another graphic organizer to help us get us started. So as with any lesson, what are the goals and learning objective? How will we assess that the students know what we want them to know? And how will we get them there? And it's also encouraging students to build and internalize their own learning and having pride in their own learning rather than, I just need to pass the test. So assessing competencies with a performance task. So it's kind of a circular thing. We have our learning goals, we plan our lessons, we do formative assessments, we give feedback, we differentiate as needed. We do our performance task or summative assessment after the unit, and then we start the circle all over again. And we're also doing formative assessments. Where are our students at before we start the next lesson or the next unit, so that we can provide the appropriate supports or scaffolding as needed.
Okay. So that is our presentation. I just want to pause here for a second and know that we are going to stay on for a little bit. If you have any questions, please type them in the Q&A. Tammy will feed them to us, and we will answer anything that we can. We did, before this particular webinar started today, as we did our registration, there were a couple of points or questions that came up at registration. So we put them on this screen here with some answers in the green. So one of the questions was, are any other schools using Math in Focus? So that, Annie, you can probably speak to that because the DOE doesn't keep track of that.
The DOE doesn't keep track of what schools are using. That's an individual district and school choice to best meet the needs of their students. I do know there are several schools and districts that do use Math in Focus within the state. And usually asking around is a good way of finding out. Also know that the New Hampshire Teachers of Mathematics have 2 Facebook groups, one elementary and one middle high school. And they may be worthwhile joining both as a means of support and possible resources. So you can post questions in them and people can respond and help you, or they'll post something that, oh, I just learned about this today.
Right. The next question too is, would like to hear opinions or comments regarding the 7th and 8th grade level curriculum. I think that as we start getting up into middle school, we start having those particular areas of strands of mathematics that tie into each particular grade level. But we're looking at, again, those Common Core and career ready standards and making sure that you're meeting those standards and competencies. So I'm not sure if this is probably the environment that you may hear any sort of opinions or comments on that. The Common Core standards are what they are. So I don't know, Annie, if you have anything else.
Well, it's also how curriculum's being defined, because schools encompass different things in their curriculum, including, what is the social emotional learning aspects and how is that tied in? Is it just content related? Is it all school related? So a lot of it's going to depend on how is your school or district defining curriculum, and then we can go from there.
Gotcha. Yep. And then this next one is somebody was looking forward to seeing examples of protocols for implementation. Hopefully you got the information that you needed, and you'll be getting access to a Google Drive with a folder that has a lot of supplemental materials in it. But know that Annie is available for support through the Department of Education. And also I am the math person, Heather Jenkins, for demonstrated success. So you can always reach out. Our information is on the end of these slides if for some reason you might need anything additional to what we provided in this particular presentation. And then the last question here is, how do you see the differences in utilizing performance tasks as student assessments within remediation at this level?
So I was just saying, how is remediation being defined? So again, it's how your school or district defines remediation and what they do. Research is showing that time tests and just memorizing facts are not recommended as remediation, but supporting the students in learning and developing strategies, providing performance tasks or those like open middle questions, open-ended questions, so that students are practicing their reasoning and discussing things with each other is also good. Something like a number talks is always good at the beginning of something and can help build those basic fact fluency number sense things. And also performance tasks. Remember, you can have the how students present the outcome. So in a math task, if they had to make a recommendation based on some math that they figured out, so like a budget for buying a car and who should you get your loan from, and then they have to write a letter. Somebody could make a video, somebody could use text to speech. So there are different ways to helping those students show what they know in the performance tasks, and utilizing them within remediation times can help them develop the skills and the reasoning abilities to help them tackle those with more confidence.
Right. And we also talk about too, when we're looking at remediation in any sense, you want to still keep in mind what the end goal is for that particular student at that grade level, and then look backwards and figure out what are they missing sort of in those train of standards that build up to this. What might we need to be able to make sure that they have first skills so that they can then still get to that particular end game at their grade level.
Heather, there were also a couple of questions put in the Q&A, and one of them, any thoughts on math in focus program for middle school, or any recommendations for middle school math programs?
Mm-hmm.
I always think it's good to look at ed reports because they do a very thorough review of a lot of different math programs. So they can help show you what are the strengths and weaknesses in the programs. And they go right into the review and giving examples of specific problems. They also tell you which programs may have those supports you need for some special ed students in terms of does the text have the reading aloud feature to it, or other supports that are needed to make things accessible to students in lots of different ways, such as the visually impaired.
Mhm.
So they're always a good place to start looking and seeing what programs are available and what the reviews are on them. And I do know that textbook writers are now starting to send their programs in as they update them or write new ones to have the review. And then another question is, how much time typically would it take a district to fully transition from traditional grading to a competency-based grading system? It depends. It does take time. And I think involving the community in the process is also important. So they know what's going on right up front and they start understanding the difference between a grade and proficiency and mastery versus almost there and just beginning the learning.
Yeah, it also really depends on exactly which model of, competency-based learning that you are really embracing. Like, I know that the first step for the schools that I've been in is at each grade level, just like Annie and I were showing you what the competencies are at that grade level. You sort of start with specific units and creating competencies for specific units, and then it just starts to build from there. So depending on how how quickly you're able to really get those things in place, it really depends on the information and how comfortable you are in creating those types of scenarios in your classrooms. All right. So when it comes to upcoming webinars and workshops, the Department of Education has the Quantile Hub with Metametrics. They have a webinar coming up with that. Just so you know, that Lexile Quantile Hub is a free, because of the Department of Education, it's free to any New Hampshire teacher. It is a really great resource for math, because what it allows you to do is it allows you to put in a standard that you might be working on, and it will tell you what the prerequisite standards are, what you can do to be able to teach this particular standard, and then if students have it, how to really enrich them and maybe push them to the next level of understanding. And it's got a whole bunch of resources on there that are sort of teaching tools. Some of it you kind of have to weed through, some of it's better than others, but it's I have found it really useful in taking a peek at, if you have a skill that students aren't getting, how can I go back and figure out what is a prerequisite skill for that. So that particular webinar is coming up. In addition,
it's also knowing that the quantile measures are now being given with the New Hampshire SAS assessments. And I know assessments that many schools use just for progress monitoring, such as iReady, also provide the quantile measures. So this is a chance to get to learn more about what quantiles are and how you can use them.
Mm-hmm. Right. Great. And then the next webinar that we have in this series, the last one, is for high school folks. So that's coming up on Wednesday, March 16th. And then webinars to be on the lookout for, if you're somebody who's looking to learn a little bit more about Excel to view your assessment results. I will be doing a webinar on that, and I will be formatting some New Hampshire SAS assessment results for that. And that's a beginner to advanced, or if you're really already good at Excel and you're looking more as a as an intermediate or advanced Excel user. We have another one of those coming up. Both of them are in April. And I know that we have Delaney and sent in the chat to everybody about those model competencies for the DOE. There is a link to that in this particular presentation. And Annie has done an amazing job at getting those put together, and they are on the DOE website. Again, when you get the link to this presentation, you can get right to the DOE portion of the website on there. So thank you for pointing that out. And hello, Delaney. All right. At this point, I don't see any other questions. We'll hang on for just maybe another minute, just in case anybody thinks of a question and wants to put it right in the chat. Other than that, thanks again so much for your time. Okay, I don't see any more questions in, so everybody have a great day, and we hope to see you soon.
Yes, thank you for coming, everyone.
All right. Take care, ladies. Bye-bye.
Bye. Talk to you later.
Mhm.